Just one. That's right. One more preseason game left, man. And I know y'all can't wait to hear me tell y'all what to look for this week. I'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguar.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. As always, you can find us over on YouTube at the Locked On Jaguars page, as well wherever you get your audio podcasts. All right, man, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do here today. But first, I got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What up to the everydayers? All right, I'm going to let you know what we're in for today. Segment 3. I'm going to go backwards so we can start at the top. Segment 3, safety net. What do we mean? What do I mean about safety net? The Jaguars keep bringing veteran safeties in, and I think the leadership that is needed has a lot to do with the scheme change, and they want to make sure that they're fine in that position. We'll talk about that in segment number 3. 4 second-year players. That's right. The quad squad are really making Trent Baalke not look so bad about that draft last week. And I'll tell you how it could actually be a plus and a bonus that all 4 of those guys are contributing. And I'll tell you who those 4 guys are as well. But first, what to watch for preseason game 3. I know there's some stuff y'all want to see, so I'm going to just get right down to it. Everybody wants to see Trevor Lawrence play a half, and they want to see him upright. That's the first thing everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see Travis Etienne look the part, look like he's ready to go, looks like he's going to be the jelly to the peanut butter or the peanut butter to the jelly for one of those 4 players I'm going to mention later on, and that's Tank Bigsby. They want a 1-2 punch. They really want a 1-2 punch. And Tank has looked good, and Etienne hasn't really done very much. We're going to see if we can get him going. The way you get both of those guys going, and the way Trevor stays upright, and the way that Travis Etienne gets some daylight to run the ball to look like the Travis Etienne we all know he can look like, is if the offensive line plays well. So up jump the boogie. This is the one thing that we are now looking forward to again this week 3 to see if the offensive line, particularly the interior of the offensive line, can look good enough so it can match our optimism and our hope for this season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know what to tell you. I don't think these dudes are going to miraculously show up one day and be big and strong and able to block everybody, anybody. I don't know which one of those body words I need to use. Is it everybody? Is it anybody? It's one of them, because sometimes you just want them to block somebody. There's another one. Okay, we'll go anybody, everybody, and somebody. Because at times it looks like they don't block anybody or nobody, right? They're capable, man. They're big, they're strong. I don't know if they're strong, but they're big, they're athletic. Somebody told me they all look like they got skinny legs. And see, I'm not going to be the one to be picking on people with skinny legs, because my legs aren't that big either. You know what I'm saying? In fact, my legs are really not big. So the thing is I don't know if it's like lower body strength, but it's some kind of strength that they seem to be missing, because they keep getting pushed around. And even Cooper Hodges, who I heard somebody call him a man mover. Well, guess what? He wasn't moving nobody the other night on a couple of plays that I've seen. Even Cooper Hodges, the second-year player, was out there. I saw him. I thought he was consoling the quarterback a couple of times, like, dog, my bad. Somebody get hit, he run over and, oh, I'm sorry, dude. Let me help you up, because it was his dude. Luke Fortner still looked like Luke Fortner, the center, third-year center from Kentucky. He still looked like he didn't go to the weight room when he was in Lexington. Van Lannon, I believe it was Blake Hance or Van Lannon, one of the guys that watched the tape, all of the tape, said that they like their feistiness. Okay. It might have been Hance. They said they like their feistiness and their toughness. That's cool. Somebody just has to do something. Tyler Shatley ain't the answer. We know that on the offensive line. People will hit me up Saturday night saying, "Ooh, I know we ain't gonna talk bad about this line. I know we ain't gonna talk bad about this line." But at this point, there's no need to continue beating a dead horse. It's not just them being unhealthy. It's they need some. They need some sandbags in their pocket, man. It's just like they get moved around too much, and I don't know if it's because they do a lot of pulling and they're not doing it quick enough, or they don't have the proper leverage, or guys just are not in step with each other. Y'all can tell I'm kind of lost for words, and I'm trying my hardest to not make y'all mad about the season that ain't even started yet. But the thing is in order for us to see some things that's going to make us believe in this team in the preseason, the offensive line is where it starts and stops. Now, the defensive line, they ain't necessarily stopping to run the way everyone thinks they should with all those new bodies. But see, there's still hope because you think, okay, Eric Armstead's going to come back. They're going to get used to the new scheme. They'll be fine, right? Well, we hope. But on the offensive line, there's like nothing else you can point to that you can add to the offensive line. There's nothing else you can point to for everybody to say, okay, this is going to happen. Like all of a sudden, they're going to come together and everybody's going to get better. The best thing that I think can happen is the Jaguars skill this thing to death offensively. And what I mean by skill this thing to death offensively, draw some stuff up, move the ball down the field. There have been a lot of teams throughout history. So somebody hit me up the other day, so we shouldn't even play the games anymore. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not telling you that the Jaguars can't have success this year. I'm just telling you it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to be made more difficult if what we've seen from the offensive line on the interior is what we're going to have all year, and that play isn't going to improve, then it's going to be hard for them to reach the goals that you want them to. I can say the same thing about the run defense, but we at least have something else to go on. You believe in those players a whole bunch more than you believe in the offensive line. At least that's what I'm thinking. So once again, it's back to that. The things we want to watch. We want to watch Trevor. We want to watch ETN. And the only way we're going to watch them with any happiness after the game is if they were able to do things that the offensive line allowed them to do if they allow them to do it. And somebody needs to allow me to speak correctly because I keep screwing that up. But it just comes back to the same old thing, man. And I know they're probably looking around and they're scouring the waiver wires, and they're going to be looking at teams that might let an older player go, or somebody who's not, who teams just want to kind of move on from, but who's still a pretty good player. I'm sure there's some veterans out there like that. Maybe. They have to, in my opinion, pick up 2 or 3 dudes once these cuts come in, because I know for a fact they can't have the 10 best guys that are going to be available. This team cannot have the 10 best offensive linemen that are going to be available before game 1. You ain't going to make wholesale changes because you're going to keep your top 7 or your top 8. But you need some people that can probably push, or even if they're not making up the caboose of the offensive line, you can inject them right in the middle of it. Find a guy who can be the 7th or the 8th dude. And if you find a guy who can be the 7th or the 8th dude, then maybe at some point they can start pushing and give you enough confidence that they can go in and help stabilize things. I tell you what, it's not all gloom and doom, because it isn't. The Jaguars won the game the other night, 20-7. We know that. I did a short, a little bit, and put it out on social media. 20-7. A little bit uneventful. We'll talk about 4 second-year players that have continued to shine, and we'll give a little love to Mac Jones. We're going to do that in segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to true peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we're talking about preseason game 1. At the end of segment 1, we were talking about a 20-7 win. Mac Jones, in my opinion, solidified the fact that he's going to be QB2, and CJ Beathard won't have a chance because he won't play this week, so he's not going to have a chance to change anybody's mind. It'll be Trevor one half, Mac the next, and I think that's the order that you're going to see it. Some highlights and some things and some spotlights without just talking about this game alone. There are 4 second-year players that are making themselves some money. There are 4 second-year players on the Jaguars team that's earning themselves some shine, that are getting themselves put in position to contribute to this team this year. The Jaguars have become a draft and develop team. You can't develop without developing, right? And that's exactly what they have appeared to have done differently this year in developing their players from that were drafted in 2023. Anton Harrison, pretty much, they developed him, but he came in pretty much really a good player, was going to start from day one, and he started at right tackle and was injured last year, and he played pretty well. But there are 3 other guys on that team, and it's possibly could be 4. I'm talking about Tank Bigsby, who's been, along with Parker Washington, both of those guys have been the absolute stars of the preseason for the Jaguars. Stars for the preseason for the Jaguars. Christian Braswell is another player, even though he was undrafted. Christian Braswell is someone who they have really talked about this year. They absolutely love Christian Braswell. In fact, he's listed as the starting nickel on the depth chart. That's because they put Darnell Savage is listed at safety. So those guys, along with, if I add a 5th guy or if I make it a little bit of a 4th guy and don't include Anton Harrison because he came ready to play, then that would be Ventrell Miller, who did, he missed a couple of tackles the other night, but he was right there. And this is his first real game action, the preseason games that he's played. This is his first action, man, in a couple of years. And then even when he was healthy, and Christian Braswell was a draft pick, by the way. He was picked in the 6th round. But even though he was healthy at Florida for sometimes, he hadn't played a lot of football in the last 2 or 3 years of Ventrell Miller. But those guys are sitting there, and they're stacked up on the 2 deep right now at the very least, and look like people that are going to make contributions. Here's why that's important. Because if you're a draft and develop team, this is proof positive that this is the way that you're going to be, and this is how it's going to go, and this is the way and the route that you want this team to be built. And it would mean that you don't have to go out in free agency and add to your depth. You'll be building it from within with a certain type of player that has a certain type of work ethic that buys into what you want. And I heard Trent Baalke mention this weekend that these guys really want to be here. these guys, it's their work. It's the way that they work. They really, really want to be here. And there's something to be said about drafting guys that have a like-minded work ethic. The other big thing is, and that's a huge thing, if you can start just addressing and filling in from within and do that, like when guys get into their third year, they're ready to be a starter, and you're getting them like not just first round and second round. Brenton Strange, a second round pick, and I'm worried about him a little bit. He gonna make the team, but I'm still worried about him. He's on the 2 deep also, but that's when they go to 2 tight ends. If they go to 1 tight end, he ain't the second one coming in, he's the third. But the thing is it's really, really super, super important for you to be able to fill in your own roster. The really good teams around the league, I hate to mention them again, but Kansas City, go look at Kansas. They just fill in guys. That's what they do. And every now and then they'll cherry pick and go get somebody else. And then they go and draft dudes that fit everything that they do, like Kingsley, their left tackle. See, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But there's a process and a way that you have to learn how to do that. And I think the Jaguars are off to a pretty good start learning how to do it. The other thing that it does is it allows you to really, really, really home in on the type of guys that you want and train those guys up with the way that you want them to be. The really good teams over the years have done that. Pittsburgh has done it. Baltimore has done it. Teams that don't lose, Green Bay was really, really good at doing it for a long time. Teams that don't ever really fall off, they're always kind of good. Mike Tomlin still hasn't had a losing season. It's because they know what type of player they want. They know exactly who to go get, what type of body of work they expect. And once you start identifying it and you start being right, then that gives you the credibility yourself. And I think Trent Baalke and what Trent Baalke has been able to do, and there's something very, very significant that I'm going to mention about this draft. What he's been able to do is, remember that draft that's the one he couldn't trade picks away. That's the one that nobody wanted the picks. That's the draft that everybody said wasn't a good draft. Now imagine getting 5 guys and not even including your second round pick. You got 5 guys that can play at offensive tackle, wide receiver, running back, corner, and Mike linebacker. You get people from a draft that everybody said wasn't very good, and all of a sudden by year 2, they're all on your 2 deep and they're making contributions. And not only that, but by year 3, some of them might be starters. That would really, really be a home run when you consider the fact that everybody thought the draft was whack. Everybody thought the draft was whack. The draft ain't any good. So much that we got on Trent Baalke for picking all of these or having all of these picks in a draft where the talent just wasn't there overall. Now imagine being in that draft. How many times have people said certain drafts weren't good, and I'll go back and I'll cherry pick and I say it's wrong. They said that about, I believe, the 2013 draft, and DeAndre Hopkins was there. And I'm like, there's good. There's Lane Johnson. There's good. And I'm just going through point. And that's a little bit unfair because everybody can point to, a player here or a player there. It's more or less about having the ability when everyone else says they don't want the picks, or having the ability when other people aren't really getting anything, and you actually cash out in the black. And that's exactly what it appears that Trent Baalke is going to be doing. Now, everybody could have been wrong. Maybe that draft turns out to be better than a whole bunch of people give it credit for. CJ Stroud certainly going to turn out to be better than a lot of people gave him credit for, and they didn't think he was a franchise guy. So prove him wrong, but prove it wrong by being on the right side of it. And right now, the Jaguars have 5 players that I'm really, really, really happy about this season that they got in that draft last year. Guys that I really, really think are going to stick. Now, I didn't even mention Yasir Abdullah and Antonio Johnson. And Antonio Johnson's in the 2 deep. So if you want to include him, I guess because there's been a little bit of a fallback for me on him a little bit because of the subject that I'm going to talk about in segment number 3. You also have to say Tyler Lacey. And if Cooper Hodges actually turns out to be as good as everybody thinks, then that entire draft can end up being a home run for Trent Baalke. And that's something that you probably never thought you'd hear me say here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment. I'm going to talk about why the Antonio Johnson situation scares me a little. Something the Jaguars keep going out adding safeties. They've added 3 veteran safeties after camp had already started. I'll tell you what I think is the reason, though, and why I think it could be really, really smart. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. That is right. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, man, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube or YouTube TV. You heard what I just said. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Remember, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We've discussed what to watch for in preseason game 3. We gave Matt Jones some love. We talked about 4 or 5 second-year players that are growling. I wanted to say barking, but I remember we're cats. We're not dogs, so they're growling, right? And then I mentioned Antonio Johnson, and I said, oh, man, maybe I'm falling back a little bit. Not that Doug Pederson said they still love him. They still love him. But we kind of thought he was, because he played last year 2, like a lot of these guys I mentioned, they didn't play very much. He played a little more than they did. And in year 2, we thought, okay, they're just going to plug him in and Antonio Johnson's going to take off. Then we didn't factor in something else. And what that was a scheme change. And I think the actual scheme that they used to play is better for his skill set than the one that they play now. It doesn't mean it don't have a place for him. I do believe, though, that the inexperience at safety and the fact that we have to mention this, the fact that Andre Cisco, the best player in the safety group, has only had 1 season where he wasn't hurt. And I don't believe this team thinks that they can go into a game or a season and risk the fact that a player who hasn't been healthy for the entire season, even if it's just going to be for a short period, 2, 3, 4 games or whatever, they can't risk him being out and then having Antonio Johnson and whoever, and Dewey Wingard's hurt now too. This can't be a situation where they got Daniel Thomas and Antonio Johnson playing safety with the schedule that they have, with the dreams and hopes that they have. And then they'd be another injury away from somebody else being banged up, right? And Darnell Savage is already out there with a non-contact jersey on during practice. So what they've done in the last few weeks, well, the last couple of weeks, but mainly they brought in Terrell Edmonds in the offseason. And they brought in Trey Flowers, who can play a little bit inside and he can play outside. But then once practice started, they went and got Adrian Amos, a big, thick, more box safety type. And then more recently, they go and get Tashawn Gibson and bring him back to Jacksonville. He was a part of 2017, 2018 Jaguars, 16, 17, and 18, I believe. He's going to have to serve a suspension the first 6 games, but he's practicing. He's already out there with the team. He's running around, and I think it was a good insurance policy because he is the type of player that if you're playing okay during the middle of the year and you need a little bit more experience, he's exactly who you go get, right, like in week 6 or 7 if somebody hasn't picked him up. So it's good that they brought him in now. Go ahead and serve a suspension. I believe it's for PEDs, and then 6-game suspension, and then be ready to rock and roll in week 7. And I do believe there's some protocol that he can come back and start practicing maybe a week or 2 early, and I think they'll be in London when that happens. But the thing is by bringing those 3 in here, I think it's an audition. I think Tashawn Gibson is going to be there. And then in week 7, if you don't think you need him, you can just release him. But I think he's going to be there. I said the other night, I think Terrell Evans has made this team. He's been the boomstick in that secondary the entire preseason. If anything, Adrian Amos is the dude that's probably the odd man out. But I think the fact that they keep bringing those guys in is because it's a new defense and they can't risk the injury. And they're already banged up with Savage, Wingard, and I don't know how long Dewey Wingard is going to be out. And the fact that Andre Cisco has a little bit of history, we hope he doesn't repeat it this year, but it's just not something you can gamble with. That's my opinion. And I also believe in teaching the new stuff that Chris Richard, probably the defensive backs coach, he probably said, you know what? I need some people in here that have that navigation system in their head. And you know, have that navigation system. I don't care if they weren't great players, but veterans that have played enough football to be in the league 6, 7, 8 years, dudes like that, they just know stuff. And defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen even raved about Tashawn Gibson's athleticism specifically. So adding more athleticism, even if it means in the B for your season after the first third of the season is gone, having Terrell Evans, a stabilizer, who also has played, this is his 7th season in the National Football League. He's played a lot of football in split safety systems. And even though I don't think Amos makes it, still just the fact that you got him in here and they have Trey Flowers, who depending on how many they keep, it could be 9 or 10, he might have a shot to stick around. They're just not going to leave this thing up to inexperience. Here's what it could mean too. It could also mean that the days of having guys like Daniel Thomas in your rotation are over. If you start keeping those veterans, then that means the dudes that have been around for 3, 4, 5 years, they haven't developed. So they're getting replaced with dudes that have been around about as long as they have, because Thomas is in his 5th year. You know, if he had developed to the level they wanted him to, they wouldn't have had to get Darnell Savage, who's in his 6th year. But this is what happens. You start pushing guys out. So let's just keep an eye on that too. Who's going to be healthy enough to have their number called to be on this roster this week, and who's going to play? Daniel Thomas had a heel last week, so he might not make it. The safety position is going to be hopefully a safety net for this defense this year. All right, man. Thank y'all for joining us again. And thank you. Make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast. Also, support our sponsors. Thank you for supporting us and support our sponsors. That's how you support us here on Locked On Jaguars. We're going to look at the game conditions tomorrow, see who's healthy, have any breaking news of roster movement that'll go on here. Things will start moving quickly. Training camp's actually over. So now we're into regular phase in practice, and they practice in the afternoon. So we'll have any breaking information. We'll make sure we get that to you here on Locked On Jaguars. Tomorrow we'll have another real good episode of Locked On Jaguars. We'll have a mailbag at some point this week. It may be tomorrow, but if not tomorrow, it'll be on Wednesday. But it's all about game week, seeing what's going to happen, who's going to play, getting ready to do this last preseason game so we could get down to week number 1. You guys take care of each other, and I'll do the same. See you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.